celebrating our 20th season. From the college by the lake, meeting the personalities and discussing the issues that affect all of Coeur d'Alene and the inland Northwest. We are the North Idaho College Public Forum. And now, here's your host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart.
I wish to start the 1992 year by wishing all of you a very happy new year. I hope 1992 is the best year you've had yet in your life. It is a very exciting show for us and appropriate we start 1992 with this program. This is the first time we've had the technical capabilities to do a program on the North Idaho College Public Forum and having guests in more than one city. Due to the Board of Education for the state of Idaho, the North Idaho College Board of Trustees, the Idaho Legislature, the Governor's Office, and the presidents of all those institutions, we've made this great step forward. So today we're going to have guests in our studio here in Coeur d'Alene at North Idaho College and also on the campus of the University of Idaho in Moscow. First of all, I'd like to welcome to the program Dr. Lee Vickers, who is the president of Lewis Clark State College, which will join us in talking about higher education. Dr. Vickers, welcome.
Thank you.
I'm equally happy to have on the program Dr. Robert Bennett, who is the president of North Idaho College, and he will join us in the same subject. And Dr. Bennett, it's always a pleasure having you here.
Thank you very much.
And I'm very happy to welcome in our studio in Moscow at the University of Idaho, Mr. Charles D'Oslo, who is the executive director of the Idaho Student Lobby. Charles, welcome on board, and we're very excited about your organization and what's happened in the last 2 years. And thank you for joining us on today's public forum.
Thank you.
We'll start the questioning today with Dr. Vickers. One of the problems that we've had in Idaho for a very long time, and I know that the legislature and the governor and others have worked with the funding that they had to do as much as they can for higher education, but when we deal with outlays for facilities on campuses across the state, as well as other state buildings in the state, we have such a small pool of money that's in the permanent building fund. Could you do a two-part answer for my question, please? First of all, are we really behind in the facilities that are needed, both in higher education and other facilities? And number two, if that is the case, where are we going to find the revenue for that problem?
I think that we indeed are behind in two aspects. One, we have not done an adequate job as far as maintenance of our buildings. All too often, maintenance comes last. That is especially true in very tight times. When you have to cut budgets, very frequently that's one of the first places that you look. And every time we do that, it means that long term it actually costs the taxpayers more. As far as what we do to try to change that, I think that one of the things we have to do is be more creative in using our facilities. We have to use them more, I think, in the evening, at noons. And for example, on our campus, starting next year on Saturday mornings, that will be a regular class period. Some students perhaps won't like that, but that's necessary. I think by doing that and by showing legislators and citizens we're actually using our facilities to the maximum, they'll be more supportive of trying to find more funds.
And Dr. Bennett, I know that you have worked hard to get certain facilities on our campus, and our most recent building is a new library computer science building. In fact, it's that technology that made this program possible. Right. But you and I have talked about the fact that for a very long time that we've had approximately $10 per individual in their state income tax going in the permanent building fund, and there's some lottery money now. But it's a really small, there's not enough money in there to build more than one building a year if you build it all in 1 year, or two at the most. Again, it's a two-part question. How are we going to use our facilities? And secondly, where are we going to find additional revenue?
Let me go a little different direction with facilities, and I think I want to hitchhike on what Lee was saying. Some of our campuses are older, and even though I think we're trying very hard to keep them working as best we can, as we have gone to some new kinds of techniques with respect to teaching, so much more in the way of computers and overlays and so many more electronic gadgetry that's used in classrooms, the old buildings simply cannot accommodate the new techniques. To give you an idea in getting away from classroom, one of the things we're wrestling with in terms of our gymnasium is the fact that we have new kinds of techniques with respect to physical training that cannot be accommodated in the kind of classroom that we've had. So even though we've kept up some of our buildings, if we have an older campus, and Lee and I both have that, we have some very special kinds of needs in terms of meeting new high-tech demands that education is putting forth.
You also have the handicap problem of access to certain buildings.
Absolutely, and this is becoming a larger problem for us all the time. In terms of financing, You're absolutely right. We have a very small pot of money and a great pot of requests. And so each year, because the state of Idaho decided that they do not want to do anything in terms of long-range financing, the only projects that can be financed or can be taken care of are those that can be paid for all in within 1 year. So as a result, Lee and I and all the other presidents are down there, in a sense, doing battle. And I don't think that's a comfortable situation for any of us. So I would hope that we can be more creative with how we're going to finance future buildings, because we have such a backlog that there's simply no way that with the current method we're going to accommodate those needs.
Charles, down in Moscow, I know that you, in representing students across Idaho, are also very concerned about where funds are going to come from. In the past, it's been a practice that tuition and fees basically goes to programs, and with the exception of students building such facilities as student unions. As we look for new revenue, what is the viewpoint of the students of where we find that revenue if we have those adequate facilities as we grow with our enrollments?
Well, I have to agree with Dr. Bennett and Dr. Vickers that we have to come up with more creative uses for our facilities. I think that one problem is that we're all fighting for pieces of the pie, and we need to work together to try to make the pie bigger overall for everybody. I don't know if this is an appropriate source as far as coming up with some of those funds, but I know that we have education endowment lands that are used to lease lands to different businesses and so on and so forth to raise money for students and education in general. And so I kind of look for those areas to be kind of exploited. I don't want the students at all being adversely affected by anything as far as cutting back on money and funds. So.
Charles, you've brought a question to mind, and the presidents may want to address this too. There's the issue of the possible 1% initiative in 1992 in Idaho. Let us suppose that is on the ballot and it was to pass. Some local governments would lose 40 to 50% of their funding, and it's in a question what would happen to community colleges. And even though four-year schools would not lose funds there, if all those other local governments have to go to the state to replace those lost funds, they would be in competition with higher education for funding. Has the Idaho Student Lobby addressed this issue, and have they taken a position yet?
We have addressed this issue, and 3 of the 4 member institutions in the Idaho Student Lobby have taken a position against the 1%. We're still waiting for a response from Idaho State University. They're holding a public forum so that their student government and students in general can make a decision on this. I think there's no question that it's going to affect students in a negative fashion if the 1% does pass. And we're going to be seeing some serious increases in tuition and fees because the state has got to come up with the money from somewhere. If they cut programs and other luxuries that the state has, I think that definitely education will be part of those, especially higher education.
Dr. Bennett, I know you have also addressed that issue before your board and before legislative bodies. Would you like to respond?
Yeah, we're financed a little differently than Lee is. As you know, we have some local tax that helps with our effort, and if the property tax were affected, and I know there are many interpretations in terms of how that would work, but we could be affected in terms of just losing about $1.3 million. And I think what you said is correct. If the state is forced to help the K-12s out to the extent that I think they would be, then there's simply less money in the Treasury. And as a result, what we get from the state would be tighter than it's been in the past. The only way, of course, that we have of maintaining would then be to go to the students. And I'm sure that's not a very comfortable position to be put in.
Dr. Vickers.
I think that it's been said well. It would mean, I think, major fee increases for our students as well as substantial cutbacks. Cutbacks at a time when access to education has never been as important as it is now. We're all going to be facing enrollment increases. We all have increased demand for services. And so if this were to pass, it would be a major problem at this point in time.
Dr. Vickers, I'd like to pursue another area, how it has a relationship to funding. At some institutions, when funding becomes very difficult or there's a reduction in the amount of money that's available or there's a rapid growth, there is a great temptation to say that we will only serve students from a certain geographical area and oftentimes not take students from other parts of the United States or international students. As a president, how do you respond to the argument on both sides of what students you serve, or do you reduce the pluralism or diversity among your student body and cultures when you make that? I know it's a tough issue. How would you suggest that we deal with that issue?
It is a very tough issue, but it seems to me that now we live in a very global society, a very diverse society, and so it's imperative, I think, that our campuses reflect that. I would hope that we can figure out ways of not reducing access to those students who really are seeking an education. We have a number of international students on our campus, and I would hope that that wouldn't change. So from our point of view, we would not adopt a policy that would freeze out one group over another.
May I take this opportunity publicly to say to you and actually to commend you for some of the programs you have in Lewiston and Coeur d'Alene each year in the fall. You do an international forum or symposium, and you bring people from all over the world in addition to the students that you have. And so your staff has shared those people with our community in this program. And it's an enrichment culturally for us, and we commend you for that.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Bennett, you've also been equally dedicated to that question. I know you've traveled abroad and visited other campuses. We have sister institutions, and you have supported a lot of students coming to this campus. So with that background, I'd like for you to address the same question.
It's a tough question. However, I think the audience does need to know that when students come from abroad, they pay considerably more money to make up the difference in terms of what the taxpayer pays to reduce tuition and fees for our local students. So in some ways, they would be paying considerably more, as they always have. But I think Lee is right when we talk about what's happening in the world. And when we look where we're located, it's particularly important that we reach out to some of these other people. And I think also a lot of Pacific Rim countries in particular are looking very closely at us because we're small, relatively safe environments. We're the kinds of schools that they would like to have their students go to. So it would be difficult to suddenly stop that, and I think it would take something away from the credibility of our programs if we did.
Thank you. Charles, from the perspective of a student, you've heard from two presidents of institutions. What do you think about the intermixing of cultures that you experience as a student yourself and other students, and how do you react to this same basic question?
Well, I feel that I've benefited greatly from having other cultures and other persons from other countries attend the University of Idaho. As Dr. Bennett mentioned, they do pay a considerable amount above what Idaho residents or even state residents pay. And so I would like to see more diversity, more accessibility for foreign students to attend the University of Idaho. Not only do they get a good education here, but they also learn from their peers as well, and those peers aren't necessarily the ones that come over to the United States to have an education here, but also from other students as well. So I think from just a generic standpoint, the student body in general has really benefited from this type of diversity. And I think, though, one thing that we have to be careful about is to not exploit diversity to a point that it's going to hurt those international students. And I think that's something that could possibly happen to make the schools look more appealing. They may say, well, we have a certain percentage of international students, so on and so forth. And so I think that we have to be really in tune to their needs and our needs, and just be cognizant to the issue overall.
There's a real important sensitivity involved in this process.
Absolutely.
Charles, I want to take time on the program at this time to ask you about the Idaho Student Lobby, and I know our two presidents are very interested in what's happened. Idaho Student Lobby was very active in the 1970s, and it went out of existence for a long period of time, and it's back now. If you would first of all tell us what kind of staff you have and what institutions belong, and what is the basic mission of the Idaho Student Lobby?
Oh, I'd be glad to explain that. The schools that are involved currently are North Idaho College, University of Idaho, Lewis Clark State College, and Idaho State University. Each school pays 25 cents per full-time equivalent student based on enrollment into this Idaho Student Lobby, and this money is used for travel expenses as well as paying a professional lobbyist. Our professional lobbyist currently is Vicki Patterson. She's serving her second term, and she works for a very small salary, but she does a lot of work for us, and we greatly appreciate it. I guess as far as addressing what the mission of the Idaho Student Lobby is kind of unifying the students across the state. as you know, that it takes 50% of the students in the university at the state of Idaho to create the Idaho Student Lobby. One or two schools couldn't represent all the students. It's got to be a majority, and that's important because we represent issues at the state level for students. Each school has their own student lobbyist that lobbies for their each individual university or college. The Idaho Student Lobby represents all students across the board. And I think that's important because legislatures will have to kind of turn an ear to us to say, hey, there's 30,000 students out there that agree on an issue, and a lot of them are potential voters. And I think they're going to have to start to realize that we're going to be a force in the state. Some items that we have been working on, our legislative agenda, if you will, include prepaid tuition. That's gone before the House and Senate, I believe, 3 times. It's going to be introduced again, and I think that there's a strong chance that it will pass. Student insurance across the state, which is a very important issue for students because not only does the insurance have to be tailored toward each student, but also for each university too. I think that's real important to help students as much as we can. And I have to give credit to North Idaho College and Tony Stewart for giving us that information. Also, the 1% initiative is going to be a big issue with us. It's going to affect students adversely if this passes, and although it seems appealing to landowners across the state, I think they're going to have to make it up somewhere else. I'd rather see, and I don't know if this is appropriate, but maybe a local option tax, something along those lines. I think that that would really benefit students greatly. And so that's kind of, in a simplified fashion, what the Idaho Student Lobby does.
Charles, I'd like to commend you and the others that are on your board and the student governments of those institutions. In fact, you're in the forefront. Only 1 or 2 states have even suggested doing what you are in insurance. Massachusetts has done that in the last 2 years. So you're to be commended for your progressive approach and your support. I would like to ask the 2 presidents that have heard some of your discussion here, and I'll start with Dr. Bennett this time. Would you like to correspond here with Charles in some way, how that student lobby can work with the presidents and the funding for higher education?
I think you hit on a key idea in terms of working with. I think that presidents and educators throughout the country really have always had students' interests at heart. Oftentimes there are differences simply because we come from different points of, we have different kinds of knowledge, and the more we work with each other, I think the less of that there would be in terms of difference. But I do want to make a comment to Charles because I was reading the Kiplinger report just yesterday, and they were talking about prepaid college tuition. And in fact, the tax laws are changing in such a way that more and more schools are, who were leaders, Michigan, one of them, is backing away from that now simply because it isn't working out with respect to taxes. So he may want to research that a little bit.
Dr. Vickers?
I would just add that it's very important, I think, that the students work with the presidents as you've suggested and as they've suggested. I think if we all work together on all of these issues, we can make some progress that will benefit students. And as Bob indicated, that's our objective. We're here to serve students. That's the reason we're here, so it's very important that we have their support and have their help.
Certainly, it's a very, very common goal. You're all doing the same thing. And also, if certain funds aren't available, student fees or tuition could reach the point to where there'd be a segment of the population that would be denied higher education. Dr. Vickers, this time I'm going to start with you about something that's very exciting and close to all of our hearts here, and that is that Lewis Clark State College, University of Idaho, and North Idaho College some years ago reached a very wise agreement in which, while North Idaho College serves North Idaho in the first 2 years, you now have programs and offices on the campus of North Idaho College. Would you just share with our viewers some of the things you're doing and how you're using the modern technology and staffs of these institutions to serve students beyond the first 2 years?
It's a very exciting project, a great project that benefits many students. Many students here in Coeur d'Alene are place-bound, and so after their first 2 years at NIC, they want and need additional education, but they can't leave. And so with cooperation and collaboration from the University of Idaho and Lewis Clark State College, many of those students can stay right here in Coeur d'Alene and continue their education. We've had great support from Bob and you and all the staff here. We are sharing facilities. We have some faculty who actually travel up here. We use some faculty on the campus here. And we also are using the new microwave system to have courses back and forth. That's very exciting technology. I would hope we could use more of that technology. I'm sure in time we can share those resources and share our faculties back and forth. I think that's the ultimate, is to share faculties in all three institutions, not just for those students, but for all of our students. There's no question that technology will play an increasing role in delivering education. This is just one part of it, but a very important part.
If I could just interject here, because you brought to my mind that the taxpayers are getting a really good deal, and the legislature and the governor, I'm sure, are aware of this, but the fact that you can take one faculty member, and that person might be on the campus at Lewiston, and have students there and here, and there'll be a coordinator here, and like we're doing right now, talking back and forth, you're just serving a larger population with half a faculty. I mean, you need one instead of two, and also the cost of the transportation. So I would argue for the position that higher education is one of the most efficient institutions in this country in dealing with maximizing the technology that we have to advance learning.
I think that your point's well taken. I think that the challenge now is to do it more and do it better. And the next challenge, it seems to me, is to help those rural areas that aren't on the microwave system. And perhaps through compressed video or other forms that are similar, we can do the same thing so that we can serve Sandpoint and Wallace and Kellogg and other areas that are a bit more isolated.
Dr. Bennett, I know you've been a champion of this also, and you might want to tell them a little about the facilities we have in working with the two institutions.
Well, I would like to talk about the facilities, but I would like to comment first to illustrate your point. People have asked me many times, when are you going to become a four-year college? And I said, no way. Why would we ever want to do that? First of all, we don't need another four-year college in this state, but when we have the opportunities via the University of Idaho and Lewis Clark State College, we're providing the same kinds of programs, and they then have the responsibility for managing and doing all the things with the upper division classes that they should. Specifically, one of the things that is really important and has grown in a large way is our nursing program. We have a one-year program and a two-year program. And as a result of Lewis Clark coming up here, now students can complete those two programs and move right on in to a four-year program, which greatly benefits their opportunities within the nursing profession. So I'm a big believer that there ought to be cooperative efforts going on among the schools, and I think, frankly, this is one of the best examples in the country of how it's working.
Charles, I know you've heard that conversation. I'd like to ask you, from the perspective, again, of a student, have you heard any of the students talk about these additional options that they can have and how that is helping them toward a degree?
Well, I've heard some rumblings. I'm not real clear on how the procedure works. I think from what I've heard just today, I think it's a wonderful idea. Anything that we can do to broaden the scope of education and bring it to more people is always good. I'd like to see more of it and if in fact be involved in it, because it sounds like a wonderful idea.
Charles, you've also created an idea for me that I will extend an invitation to you now, that at a little later time that maybe we can get together some students from all the campuses across the state and do a program and let you talk more about the needs of students from every end of the state on this program. So I extend that invitation at this time.
Well, I accept that invitation. I'd be more than happy to do whatever I can for the students, not just here at the University of Idaho, but across the state. It's real important because we do have certain interests and rights even, and it's something that we need to work on and kind of get rid of some of that apathy and get some good items for the students. Thank you.
Dr. Vickers and Dr. Bennett, I want to give you an opportunity now to do something. This program is airing, I believe, the day before the legislative session opens. And so I know you both have an agenda. And I'll start with our guests first, Dr. Bennett and Dr. Vickers. And tell us something that, some of the priorities you have in the upcoming session. And
I think my major message to the legislature will be that this year, because of reapportionment, it'll be very easy for legislators to lose sight of funding for higher education because they'll be very much involved in other matters. I'll be trying to convey to them the idea that access, once again, has never been more important, that we have more and more students, there are more and more needs. And in our case, legislators hear a lot about youth at risk, but there are many adults who are also at risk, and they have to have access to higher education. And so we, I think, are providing that with a number of creative ways. We have an excellent faculty. We're making strides. I'll be talking to them about assessment. One of the things they're asking us more and more is, you talk about quality, but can you really demonstrate that? I think we can demonstrate that. One of the things we're really emphasizing right now is our program in teacher education. We're very proud of that program, and so I'll be spending a lot of time at the legislature talking about our success in that area. And I'm confident that if we work hard enough that they'll listen and we'll do well.
Thank you. Dr. Bennett, I know you have a number of items to take to Boise also.
Right. It seems like we always do. It never ends. I think it's important always to stress the fact that the legislators have been trying very hard to be good to us, and I think they are conscientious people, and I think we then in turn must explain to them that we've used their monies well. And I think we can demonstrate that in terms of the kind of quality programs that we have. One thing, however, I want to speak to, and I think it's becoming increasingly a larger problem for all of education, and that is, as we preach to people and we say the only way that people are going to have a chance to retrain or to make something of themselves is to go back into education. Many of those people, and Lee alluded to it, do not have the skills that they need to learn well. So in addition to the normal kinds of learning activities that we have, now we are, in a sense, given another very large responsibility, and it does take money, and that is to let those people get those learning skills that will make it possible for them to do well in class. That's an additional kind of training program. So when people say, why is education costing so much more money? We have to understand, the people who are providing the money have to understand that they are providing for new kinds of opportunities and new kinds of activities, and it's in a broadening approach. And yet I think it's very healthy in light of, as we look into the 21st century, we're going to have these people better educated. So even though it's going to continue to cost considerable money, I think the legislators have got to understand that this is the best option that they have with respect to meeting those demands.
Charles, we're just about out of time, but we know that the mean age is, at many campuses, such as North Idaho College, is 28 or 29, and you're seeing that too, aren't you, that people are coming back and being retrained, or people go through 2 or 3 careers in one lifetime?
Sure. We do have a larger number of non-traditional students that are coming back after either getting a degree or trying to finish up one from another school, and I think that that's something that needs to be addressed here, especially at the University of Idaho, is kind of tailoring that kind of retraining process for them and making it a little better understanding rather than the more traditional ways of retraining and just teaching in general. So that's, I think, from the student standpoint, that they kind of understand that and are readily accepting that.
Well, thank you, Charles. I have to interrupt this point. All 3 of you have just done an excellent job, and we're delighted with this new endeavor and new technology, and our viewers can see how we can serve so much better by being able to tie our message across the state and interview all of you. And thank you for this very nice program. And ladies and gentlemen, please join us again next week at this same time, and we will discuss what we believe to be an important issue. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
The North Idaho College Public Forum was videotaped live from the studios of Telemedia Services on the campus of North Idaho College for viewing at this more appropriate time. We invite you to join us again next week for another all-new edition of the North Idaho College Public Forum on this public television station.